Trump didn't just lose Marjorie Taylor Greene, he lost the one person who built her entire political existence on being his human shield, his attack dog, his unfiltered megaphone. And now she's walking away, publicly, loudly, and on her own terms. Because even she couldn't tolerate the chaos, the ego, and the absolute circus anymore. Let that sink in. When MTG, the queen of performative outrage, the self-appointed torchbearer of Trumpism, the woman who turned conspiracy into a brand, when she says, "I'm done," that's not a political moment. That's an alarm bell. It's a 5-story, neon-lit, blaring-in-her-face indicator that something inside MAGA is collapsing from within. And honestly, it's pathetic. Because this isn't a resignation. This is a retreat. This is a loyalist who finally saw the cost of loyalty. This is someone who spent years torching her own credibility, her own reputation, her own party, just to be within Trump's gravitational pull, only to get burned by the exact star she orbited. And what's wild is the reaction from Trump world. They're scrambling. They're attacking her credibility. They're pretending she never mattered. They're calling her a traitor. Because that's how this movement works. Loyalty is transactional. Devotion is conditional. The second you step out of line, they rewrite the entire history of the relationship and pretend you were a problem from the start. It's not politics, it's gaslighting.
Let's be extremely clear about what's happening here. Trump losing MTG isn't just one ally walking away. It's a structural failure. It's a foundational crack. She was built into the infrastructure of MAGA. She was the archetype, the blueprint, the say anything, torch anything, defend everything avatar. She wasn't just a member of the movement. She was the movement's reinforcement. And if she is saying the quiet part out loud, if she is calling out the dysfunction, the manipulation, the internal rot, then the illusion of unity was never real. It was branding. And this split didn't come out of nowhere. The warning signs were there. The public disagreements, the distancing, the frustration, the sudden moments where she seemed exhausted, not by Democrats, not by the media, not by the deep state she pretends is hiding under every bed, but by her own side. And the second she expressed the tiniest deviation from Trump's commandments, boom, she was shoved out of the inner circle. She went from warrior for America to unreliable liability overnight, because that's the rule. You're either all in or you're purged. And here's the part that should terrify Trump. If MTG, arguably the most loyal shock trooper in his entire arsenal, can walk away, then what does that mean for everyone else who isn't nearly as invested? What does that mean for the so-called MAGA majority in Congress? What does that mean for candidates who tied their entire identity to Trump only to see the risks pile up and the rewards disappear? This isn't just another headline. This is the beginning of a political structural collapse happening in real time. And the people pretending everything is fine, the same people screaming loyalty while stabbing each other behind closed doors, know it.
They're watching the empire crack from the inside. Trump lost MTG, and with her goes more than a seat in Congress. He lost the myth of unbreakable loyalty. He lost the veneer of control. He lost a pillar of his own movement. And for the first time in a long time, he can't spin it. Not when the fracture is this loud. Because if we're going to understand the magnitude of this meltdown, we have to start with the receipts. Every quote, every fracture, every moment that led to what we're watching right now. And yes, there are receipts. Because people like to pretend that MTG woke up last Thursday and randomly decided to resign. No. This wasn't spontaneous combustion. This was a slow, grinding disintegration of a relationship built on fear, loyalty, and mutual political usefulness. And when the usefulness dried up, the loyalty evaporated. That's the entire story of Trumpism in a sentence. Start with the Epstein File fight. That wasn't a minor disagreement. That was a line in the sand. MTG went on camera and pushed hard for full transparency. She wanted every document released, every name, every connection. And where was Trump? Suddenly evasive, suddenly uninterested, suddenly not focusing on that issue right now. Right, sure, because this is the same guy who loves chaos, loves conspiracies, loves pretending he's the only truth teller who sees the hidden hands pulling the strings until it lands uncomfortably close to people he doesn't want to alienate. And Greene noticed. She said it publicly. She called it out. She didn't back down. But that wasn't the only fracture. Look at the statements MTG made about Congress. My bills go nowhere. My work is ignored. I'm treated like a problem instead of an asset.
These aren't throwaway comments. These are statements of betrayal. These are the words of someone who believed she was integral to the movement, only to discover she was a backup dancer in someone else's show. And the second she said anything even slightly corrective, Trump allies started leaking to the press that she was unstable, difficult, off message. You know the drill. This is the standard playbook. Discredit the person so you don't have to address the argument. And remember how she denied the presidential rumors? She didn't just deny them, she annihilated them. Complete lie. Never wanted it. Never said it. That's not just clarification. That's a direct shot at the people inside Trump world who started that rumor in the first place. Because that rumor didn't appear organically. It was planted. It was engineered to paint her as self-interested, disloyal, ambitious, calculating, everything Trump hates in an ally. And she knew exactly who did it. That was her way of saying, if you're gonna smear me, I'll do it louder on the record. And then we have the public blowouts over immigration, over foreign aid, over budget negotiations, over the speaker battles. She backed the wrong horses, Trump attacked her picks, she attacked Trump's picks, and suddenly the narrative became MTG is unpredictable. No, she was just no longer willing to rubber stamp whatever Trump demanded. That's not unpredictability, that's independence. And independence is the ultimate unforgivable sin in Trump universe.
Let's talk about the timing of her resignation. January 5, not December, not immediate, not effective today. She chose a date that lands right before the midterm season fully ignites. Why? Because if she left mid-session, Trump would claim she abandoned the movement at a critical moment. But resigning right before the midterms, that forces the movement to confront her absence when it matters most, when the narrative of Republican unity is supposed to be airtight, and she knows that. There's another detail people keep missing. MTG didn't just resign. She weaponized the resignation. She framed it as liberation. She said, I refuse to be a battered wife. Do you realize how explosive that framing is? She compared her relationship with Trump to a cycle of abuse. That's not political spin. That's an accusation of psychological domination. That's saying the quiet part out loud in ways no one else in the movement dared to even whisper. That's telling millions of MAGA voters he treats his allies the same way he treats his enemies, like tools. And Trump's reaction? Not a unifying message, not a thank you for her service, not even a dismissive tweet pretending everything is fine. No, he went silent, completely silent. The man who attacks anybody who blinks wrong suddenly has nothing to say about one of his loudest loyalists walking out on him? That silence is not accidental. That silence is fear, because acknowledging the resignation would force him to acknowledge the fracture, and he can't do that. His entire political identity is built on invincibility, on dominance, on the myth that people don't leave him, he leaves them. MTG broke the myth, and he has no script for that scenario. Now contrast MTG's exit with how Trump responded to Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, John Kelly, Bill Barr, Jeff Sessions, Michael Cohen, Omarosa, anyone who left him. He eviscerated them instantly. But not MTG. Why? Because this isn't a traitor to the movement. This is someone the movement still loves. This is someone the base resonates with. This is someone who embodied the MAGA psyche more authentically than half the people in Trump's orbit today. Attacking MTG risks alienating his own supporters, so he stays silent, and the silence is an admission of weakness. Let's go deeper. Look at the structural implications. Her resignation forces a special election in Georgia's 14th district, a district Trump won by enormous margins. That seat should be a safe Republican stronghold. Instead, it becomes an open audition for which faction of the Republican Party dominates that district: Trumpism, establishment conservatism, or a breakaway post-MAGA populism. MTG was the anchor that held those worlds together. Without her, that district becomes a battlefield. And that's the last thing Trump needs heading into a midterm season already drenched in division. And then there's the national storyline. For years, MTG was the face of extreme loyalty. She positioned herself as Trump's congressional enforcer, his defender, his amplifier. She believed in Trump long after other Republicans tried to distance themselves. When McCarthy got ousted, she sided with Trump's favorite candidates. When internal fights erupted, she aligned with the Trump flank. When impeachment debates resurfaced, she attacked Biden harder than anyone. She wasn't just performing loyalty, she lived it. So imagine how colossal the internal dysfunction must be for someone that embedded in the movement to say, I'm done letting this system treat me like garbage. That's the real story. It's not the resignation. It's what the resignation reveals. Because here's the truth that Trump world desperately wants to bury. MTG didn't fall out of loyalty with Donald Trump. She fell out of denial. She stopped pretending that chaos is strategy. She stopped pretending that dysfunction is strength. She stopped pretending that the movement is unified when it's obviously cannibalizing itself. And that's the part Trump can't handle. He needs the illusion more than the reality. And this brings us to the most crucial point of the forensic breakdown. This fracture didn't happen behind closed doors, it happened publicly. MTG went from loyalist to dissenter in full daylight. She wasn't pushed quietly, she wasn't threatened into silence, she wasn't disciplined by the party. She made the break herself and then broadcast it. That is unprecedented in Trumpism. Splits happen all the time, but they happen in the shadows. Not this time. This was loud, this was intentional, this was a strategic exit designed to expose the internal decay that the movement keeps insisting doesn't exist. And that's the part Trump can't handle. He can't punish her without alienating her voters. He can't ignore her without acknowledging the weakness. And he can't replace her because nobody in the movement hits her unique combination of loyalty, charisma, controversy, and audience capture. MTG isn't just another Republican. She was a symbol. And symbols don't resign. They collapse movements when they fall. Her exit is the first domino, and the people around Trump know it. They're already panicking behind the scenes. They're already leaking stories about who's next. They're already drafting their narratives about why this totally isn't the beginning of the end. But make no mistake, they know exactly what this moment means. When the core begins to defect, the structure fails. When the loyalists break, the myth breaks. And when the myth breaks, the movement follows. And this is where the bigger picture becomes impossible to ignore, because what's happening with MTG isn't isolated. It's a symptom. It's part of a long, predictable pattern that defines how Trump builds power, maintains power, and ultimately loses power. If you zoom out even slightly, you see the same story repeat itself over and over, like some kind of political Groundhog Day of dysfunction. Allies come in, they get used, they get chewed up, and then they get discarded the second they stop being convenient. It's not ideology, it's not loyalty, it's not strategy. It's a cycle that Trump's movement depends on but can never sustain. And every time that cycle resets, the movement gets weaker. Look back at the beginning. From the earliest days of Trump's political life, the pattern was already visible. Remember Michael Cohen, the guy who once said he would take a bullet for Trump? The guy who turned his own life, career, and identity into a tribute act for Trump's ego? What happened to him? The second he became a liability? Gone. Not just cut off, obliterated, vilified, turned into a public enemy. He didn't suddenly become untrustworthy. He didn't suddenly lose his principles. He simply stopped being useful. Same with Jeff Sessions, the first senator to endorse Trump, the darling of the America First movement, the man Trump picked as attorney general because he was supposed to be the loyal soldier. But the second he recused himself from the Russia investigation, following actual legal precedent, Trump flipped. Sessions became the enemy. Not because of ideology, not because of actions, because he didn't bend the knee hard enough, long enough, or publicly enough. Bill Barr, same thing. Trump praised him to the heavens when Barr was running interference, spinning lies, and shielding him from accountability. But the moment Barr refused to falsify the election results and acknowledged that there was no widespread fraud, boom, weak, pathetic, rhino. Same playbook. John Kelly, Rex Tillerson, Jim Mattis, General Milley, Nikki Haley, Mick Mulvaney, Sarah Sanders, Kayleigh McEnany. The list is endless. The turnover rate in Trump world is so catastrophic that if it were any other administration, it would be studied as a textbook case of political self-sabotage. But with Trump,
the chaos is intentional. The instability is the feature, not the bug. Because as long as everyone's replaceable, nobody can challenge him. And that's the crucial context for understanding the MTG situation. She didn't just break with Trump, she broke the pattern. Because in Trump's universe, people get pushed out. They don't walk out. They get fired, humiliated, attacked, or sidelined until they leave on their own, quietly, pretending they wanted to retire or spend more time with their family. But MTG didn't give Trump that satisfaction. She walked out loudly. She walked out defiantly. She walked out while still holding political capital with the base. And that's new. That's dangerous. That disrupts the entire internal power dynamic. Because let's be extremely clear, Trumpism depends on fear. Every ally stays close because they're terrified of being the next public execution. They've watched Trump destroy careers, reputations, marriages, livelihoods out of spite. They've seen senators grovel after being insulted. They've watched governors beg for forgiveness after Trump threatened to primary them. The entire system is built on public humiliation as discipline.
But when MTG walked away, she showed that the cost of staying might actually be greater than the cost of leaving. And that flips the equation Trump relies on. If loyalists realize that they can survive outside the movement, that they can criticize him and still retain their audience, Trump loses leverage. And if he loses leverage, he loses control. Now look at the broader political landscape. Trump's entire strategy has always been built on creating a permanent state of internal war. He pits allies against each other, he elevates one until they're too big, then he knocks them down. He builds temporary coalitions that implode the moment they accomplish their purpose. He thrives on the chaos because the chaos makes him the sole constant. But that strategy collapses the moment someone else becomes a constant. And for years, MTG was that constant. She built her own brand, she built her own audience, she built her own power, independent of Trump's direct supervision. And Trump hates nothing more than an ally who stops being dependent. This is why the movement is fracturing, because Trump doesn't share power. He can't. It's not in his DNA. When the Freedom Caucus tried to carve out its own identity, Trump scorched them. When Ron DeSantis tried to build a national profile, Trump annihilated him. When Tucker Carlson started becoming more influential than Trump among certain voters, Trump attacked him. It's a repeated pattern. Anyone who becomes too powerful becomes a threat. Now zoom out even further. This pattern isn't unique to allies. It applies to institutions too. Trump has burned through every institutional guardrail he's ever touched. The courts, delegitimized. The DOJ, politicized. The intelligence community, attacked. The Pentagon, accused. The press, enemy of the people. The electoral system, rigged if he loses, legitimate if he wins. Trump doesn't coexist with institutions, he consumes them.
And this fundamentally shapes the internal structure of MAGA. The movement isn't built to last, it's built to churn, built to constantly refresh its pool of foot soldiers while discarding the ones who get burned out or insufficiently loyal. It's a political pyramid scheme where the currency is devotion and the payoff is proximity to power. And like every pyramid scheme, it collapses when the people at the bottom stop believing the pitch. That's what MTG represents. For years, she sold the illusion of a united movement, loudly, aggressively, sometimes embarrassingly. She was the product and the salesperson at the same time, and when she stopped believing in the product, she walked away from the job. And the second she walked away, the illusion cracked. And if you think this is overblown, consider who Trump world is panicking about next. Matt Gaetz, Lauren Boebert, Andy Biggs, even J.D. Vance, behind the scenes, is being watched closely because once one pillar falls, the others start wobbling. Loyalty evaporates fast when rewards dry up. These people didn't join Trumpism out of principle. They joined because the movement looked unstoppable, because attaching themselves to Trump's political machinery gave them status, relevance, airtime, fundraising, and validation. But when the machinery falters, as it's faltering now, they start looking for exits, for pivots, for post-MAGA futures. And history tells us exactly what comes next. When Trump senses that loyalty is slipping, he tightens his grip. He lashes out harder. He demands public displays of devotion. He increases the purity tests. He turns minor disagreements into existential betrayals.
He escalates the stakes because he knows he can no longer rely on fear alone. And that kind of escalation accelerates the internal collapse.
Now think about the broader Republican Party. They've been pretending for almost a decade that Trumpism is sustainable, that the movement can function without cannibalizing itself, that the base will stay unified even when the leadership is constantly in civil war. But MTG's exit exposes what the party has tried to hide. The movement eats its own. It always has. It always will. And every defection accelerates the decay. Look at the post-2020 landscape. The people who stayed loyal got indicted, subpoenaed, arrested, bankrupted, or politically isolated. The people who left early ended up being vindicated. The pattern is undeniable. And now with MTG stepping out on her own terms, the message to other Republicans is clear. Staying loyal to Trump doesn't guarantee survival. In fact, it might guarantee the opposite. And that's why this moment is bigger than Trump losing a single ally. This is the beginning of the unraveling of the mythology that Trump's movement is unbreakable, the mythology that loyalty is eternal, the mythology that dissent equals political suicide. MTG proved that dissent can be a lifeline, and that realization is contagious. Now, we have to talk about voters, because this is where the pattern becomes existential. MAGA voters don't just follow Trump. They follow symbols. They follow personalities. They follow figures who reflect their rage, their distrust, their grievances. MTG was one of those symbols. Her break with Trump doesn't just create division at the top, it creates confusion at the bottom. It forces voters to choose between competing visions of what MAGA even is. And when a movement built on singular identity fractures into factions, the entire brand collapses.
This is the part Trump fears most. Not MTG, not Congress, not political insiders. He fears losing control of the base. And MTG stepping out isn't just a political split. It's an ideological split. It's a cultural split. It's a signal that the movement is no longer synchronized. And once that synchronization breaks, it doesn't come back. And this is where the stakes become impossible to downplay, because what MTG just did isn't merely a resignation, it's a warning shot. It's a flare fired straight into the center of a movement that pretends it's unbreakable. When a figure that central, that loyal, that ideologically committed walks away, it exposes something Trump has spent years trying to bury. The movement is hollow, it's brittle, it survives on momentum, not structure. It's kept alive by spectacle, not stability. And when the spectacle cracks, when the illusion fades, people start noticing how unstable the foundation really is. Because here's the uncomfortable truth for Trump and every single person still clinging to him. MTG's exit proves that the movement can't hold people the way it used to. The spell is weakening, the intimidation isn't landing, the fear isn't working. She walked away without being destroyed. She walked away without losing her base. She walked away without crawling back an apology. And that's the nightmare scenario for Trump. Because if others realize they can do the exact same thing, the entire authoritarian ecosystem collapses. Make no mistake, Trumpism was never built on policy. It was never built on ideology. It was built on dominance. It was built on the appearance that Trump controls everything, everyone, everywhere. But when someone escapes that control, publicly, proudly, aggressively, the entire mythology breaks. The strongman facade shatters, and the second people realize the king bleeds, the palace walls tremble.
Trump's second-term midterms are coming. The GOP is fractured, infighting, limping, exhausted. They're running candidates who are either too extreme to win independents or too boring to energize the base. Their entire strategy depends on projecting confidence, on pretending that the movement is unified, rising, invincible. But MTG's exit detonates that narrative. It throws gasoline on an already burning divide between the traditional GOP, the populist GOP, and the Trump loyalists who are trying to navigate their shrinking window of relevance. And the voters see it. They see the cracks. They see the chaos. They see the party tearing itself apart while pretending everything is fine. And voters, especially independent, suburban, young, first-time and alienated Republican voters, can spot desperation a mile away. They know a collapsing movement when they see one. They know when a party is holding a family photo in front of a house fire and insisting everyone's doing great. But here's the real danger, the part that goes beyond elections and beyond Trump. When a movement built on rage and conspiracy loses cohesion, it doesn't just fade, it mutates. It fractures into even more extreme factions. It becomes unpredictable, leaderless, decentralized. It becomes a network of splinter movements, each competing for who can be the loudest, the angriest, the most paranoid. And that's where the real risk lies. Because when people lose the figure controlling their anger, the anger doesn't disappear. It spreads. We've seen this pattern before. January 6th wasn't a spontaneous eruption. It was the result of a leader stoking fury and then losing control of the very forces he unleashed. And as his grip weakens again, those same forces, radicalized, angry, directionless, will look for someone else to follow. Or worse, act without anyone directing them at all.
And politically, the stakes are even more immediate. A fractured MAGA movement means legislative chaos. It means obstruction for the sake of obstruction. It means a Congress where the loudest voices have the least interest in governing. It means national security risks because foreign adversaries exploit division. It means economic instability because Congress becomes incapable of passing budgets, raising debt ceilings, or funding federal functions. And all of that becomes amplified when the internal fractures become public, permanent, and irreversible. MTG's exit is one of those fractures. Because here's the reality Trump doesn't want you to see. A movement that loses its loyalists is a movement that loses its future. A movement that relies on fear can't survive once people stop being afraid. A movement that demands total allegiance collapses the moment someone proves that allegiance isn't mandatory. MTG proved it. That's why this moment matters. So what happens next? The answer is simple and terrifying. Trump will double down. He always does. He'll demand more loyalty from the people still around him. He'll escalate the rhetoric. He'll escalate the lies. He'll escalate the targets. Because when control slips from his hands, he doesn't reflect. He retaliates. And retaliation will deepen the fractures rather than repair them. The GOP will try to pretend it's fine. They'll insist MTG was irrelevant, problematic, replaceable. They'll beg donors to ignore the chaos. They'll beg voters to ignore the fight. But the truth will sit there, undeniable. One of their strongest pillars just walked out because even she couldn't survive the dysfunction.
And voters, they'll see a party imploding under the weight of its own contradictions. They'll see a movement so consumed by loyalty tests that it can't function. They'll see a leader who can't keep his allies, can't control his message, and increasingly can't control the movement he built. And in the end, the collapse won't come from the outside. It never does. It will come from moments exactly like this, from the loyalists who finally say, enough. Trump didn't just lose MTG, he lost the illusion. He lost the control. He lost the fear that held everyone in line. And once fear breaks, everything breaks.